Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, and things adjacent. And my dog has something to say about it as well. She's going to chime in. We've been getting a ton of rain. It rained all night long, very heavily. So that's a good thing, because we are prone to not have enough rain. And fairly recently, California was in a serious drought for almost 6 years. And we've had good amounts of rain over the last couple of years, so delaying the whole drought phenomenon, it still doesn't really help us in the wildfire area, or hasn't. But anyways, right now we're getting a ton of rain, and it looks like we're going to get some rain for Christmas. Please make sure to like the video and make sure that you are still subscribed. Don't know if I already said that or not. My brain can't remember anything, can't retain. My brain can't retain. Which I think I'm going to make a t-shirt called My Brain Can't Retain. I think that'll be a big seller. So, as I said yesterday, I was going to try and dig up the information from Peter Carter about the methane releases. I don't know if this is the right thing that I'm looking at. So if it's the wrong thing, if somebody has the actual source for the Energy and Technology Journal, this is from a website called energyandtechnology.org. But it looks like it's kind of talking about the same readings, so I'm just going to go through it. New data for 2019 show record-breaking levels of methane in the atmosphere within a fragile Arctic region. And the headline is Arctic methane levels reach new heights, and this is from September 16th, 2019. Latest data released by the U.S. institution, the NOAA Earth System Research Laboratory, sounds afresh alarm bells for the Arctic and climate change. It adds further evidence corroborating an earlier hypothesis that predicts a catastrophic release of methane in the coming decades due to thawing Arctic permafrost. In a central Arctic location, a research site in the U.S. state of Alaska, record-breaking level in methane concentration was recorded for this year. The sudden jump sent waves of uneasiness through social networks. In August, methane levels above 2,040 parts per billion were spotted by the Barrow Atmospheric Baseline Observatory, located 8 kilometers east of the city of Utrecht in Alaska. To spot methane levels breaking the 2,000 parts per billion mark so sharply in this fragile region is unprecedented, as the chart below illustrates. Record high readings of over 2,000 parts per billion are real and part of a record surge in Arctic methane levels this year. And here's the chart here. Here you go. Hi. Dr. Paul Balcom of Imperial College London told ENT that almost half of global methane emissions originate from natural sources. There are several sources of methane emissions globally. Whilst we have a quite accurate understanding of total global emissions, allocating this to specific sources is a bit more uncertain. Emissions come from both natural sources, such as wetlands, and man-made, for example, agriculture and oil and gas. They always feel the need to do this, I think. We don't know. We're not sure. Which is, that's just scientific reticence. The problem is to accurately pinpoint the source of methane. It is easy to know how much methane is in the atmosphere, but it is very difficult to work out what the source is, he said. Balcom adds that there is no consensus on the specific cause of this increase in concentration. Some point the finger at natural gas production, shale gas in particular, whilst others have suggested it comes from biogenic sources. It's also possible that the atmosphere's ability to scrub methane from the air via chemical reactions is reducing and could be contributing to the increase. Increasing levels of methane in the Arctic region concern experts because it is one of the most potent greenhouse gases in Earth's atmosphere. Balcom says he has witnessed a pretty consistent trend over the last 10 years showing increased methane concentrations in the air. This increase is very bad news for climate change, as methane is a strong climate forcer. Methane emissions are only around 3% of those from carbon dioxide on a kilogram basis, but are responsible for approximately a quarter of today's anthropogenic warming. Responsible for approximately a quarter. That's a lot. In 2013, a group of economists and polar scientists claimed that methane released by thinning permafrost could cause catastrophic climate change and cost the world $60 trillion. Another graph here. Global average levels of atmospheric methane abundance have been recorded as constantly increasing since 2007 after nearly 10 years of stability. E&T was contacted over concern for using 2019 data for the Barrow Atmospheric Baseline Observatory site. This is a clarification on the 18th of September. The data could still not be validated and may be a bit noisy from local pollution and could be subject to change in an addendum. Okay, so there you go. And to go back, I think I covered this. Pretty sure that I did. But to go back to this other, I really hate when websites do this. Stop doing this. This is about methane flares in Russia. Russian scientists say they found the highest ever flares of methane in Arctic waters. And we talked about this maybe a few months ago. This is from October. But just to, add a little context to the methane emissions, Russian scientists studying Arctic waters found the most powerful ever methane jets shooting up from the seabed to the water surface, they said Friday. Igor Semeletov, the chief scientist aboard a vessel carrying 65 scientists on a 40-day research voyage, told CNN via satellite phone that he found amounts of methane in the air over the East Siberian Sea up to 9 times the global average. And I don't know if that they mean the global average being 800 parts per billion. Maybe they'll clarify that. I'm just going to assume that, but nine times. Methane is a powerful greenhouse gas with a significantly greater global warming potential than carbon dioxide, according to NASA. The methane emissions in the Arctic, fueled by the melting of permafrost on the seafloor, are one driver of climate change. The emissions are presenting a growing risk. Methane levels Smeletov's team found in the air above the seawater were extremely high, quote unquote. He said nobody has detected these concentrations. In previous trips, Semeletov said he found methane at 3, 4, or 5 parts per million at these sites, well above the average atmospheric methane concentration of 1.7 parts per million. So there you go. 1.7 parts per million global atmospheric methane concentration. On this trip, some of the measurements were up to 16 parts per million. Wow. Smeletov said he embarked on 30 to 35 expeditions over the past 15 years, but on this one, there were some surprises. He said the methane emissions, which look like torches or flares, are all increasing. Smeletov and his colleague, Natalia Shakova, raised an alarm with their 2010 paper in the journal Science showing that underwater permafrost on the seabed of the Arctic shelf could melt and release methane into the ocean. Prior to that, scientists thought the subsea permafrost was essentially an impermeable barrier, keeping methane at bay. In a 2012 interview published by the European Geophysical Union, Shakova said the hydrocarbons buried beneath the Arctic shelf have potential to be a major contributor to climate change. This is well documented. Everybody knows about these warnings from Shakova, which she kind of backtracked on a little bit later. As permafrost on the seabed melts, it could dramatically change Earth's atmosphere, she said, noting the release of only 1% of the gas could make an impact. The very shallow water column and weakening permafrost could lead to the doubling of methane in the atmosphere in a matter of decades, Shakova suggested. In past trips, the scientists found the methane seeps growing year by year and summarized decades of results earlier this year in the journal Geosciences. It's crucially important to study the change in size of the seeps, Semiletov said. Semiletov said, so far, the increasing methane emissions are a significant contribution to global warming, but not catastrophic. 9 times the level, not catastrophic. However, the public should know it would affect climate in the near future if there are increases in the rate of permafrost degradation. Yeah. So I just wanted to go back over that for review. It is being charted or being noted that there is increased methane in the atmosphere. There are more methane leaks becoming apparent. And as the Arctic News blog pointed out, that significant methane releases in the next year could lead to exponential warming. Do with that what you will. Lastly, in this video, I just wanted to. So I didn't really talk about the last debates. There was some kind of general goofiness going on with the questions, but very interestingly, so because there were fewer people on stage, everybody got more speaking time, and finally, significantly, Bernie Sanders got a lot more speaking time. He actually got the most speaking time of all the people on stage, and he spent his time talking about climate change over and over and over again, which I found interesting, refreshing, because so many of the past debates have completely excluded climate change. And the few times it was mentioned was when in the middle of saying something about something else, Bernie Sanders would be like, yeah, climate change, But anyways, I want to read something that he said about climate change. Was I was a little amazed to hear this coming from a candidate on the debate stage. Sanders said, "Tim," to the moderator, "in all due respect, your question misses the mark." So he was being asked if they would sponsor a government-funded program to relocate families living in areas affected by climate change. And Sanders said, "Your question misses the mark. The issue now is whether we save the planet for our children and our grandchildren." Sanders has proposed the most sweeping and costly climate change plan in the field, one that would cost somewhere around $16 trillion. He has held climate rallies with fellow high-profile Green New Deal advocate, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. He argued that the moderators and his opponents were looking at the issue on too small a scale. "You're talking about the Paris Agreement. That's fine. Ain't enough. We've got to, and I've introduced legislation to do this, declare a national emergency. The United States has got to lead the world," Sanders said. Pretty far-reaching stuff from Bernie Sanders, especially in the face of the fact that they have just completely shut down the issue of climate change in all the past debates. And if they ever have asked a question about climate change, they don't ask it of Bernie Sanders, the person with the most far-reaching climate change plan. And it goes on to say, and maybe, just maybe, instead of spending $1.8 trillion a year globally on weapons of destruction, maybe an American president, i.e. Bernie Sanders, can lead the world instead of spending money to kill each other. Maybe we pool our resources and fight our common enemy, which is climate change. I'll let the words speak for themselves. But pretty heady stuff from Bernie Sanders in regards to climate change from the last presidential debate. There were a few other exchanges which I thought were really good, really solid. But leading the pack, taking the lead. And on top of that, he was saying, he was interjecting climate change in places, none of the other candidates were like, oh, and by the way, let's talk about climate change. But Bernie Sanders, like, every chance that he got was like, oh, and let's talk about climate change. Is Bernie Sanders going to save the planet from climate change? I think I feel like he even said something in that exchange about it may be too late or something to that effect. I thought I heard those words come out of his mouth. Like, we don't even know, it may be too late to save the planet for our children. Something like that. So, he's aware. He's fully aware of the problem, as are all the other leaders, as is the Department of Defense and the Pentagon and the military. Everybody knows, all the rich people in the world, all the oligarchs, all the corporate heads, all of them know, they all know we're in big ass trouble. And they're trying to not tell you for as long as possible. That's the game. Take that and chew on it, if you will. That's all I have for you today in this video. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.